Welcome back to American Family Radio Network Financial Issues. I'm Dan Celia. It's great to be here. We've got a fair amount of economic news coming out this week. Let's see. Yeah, I would say pretty important stuff. There's a couple things that I like more than others, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, and we'll go through what we can expect each day this week as far as economic data. Of course, the big news this week is likely to be two things. One is the Fed is starting its meeting for the month tomorrow. It'll go tomorrow, Wednesday. Wednesday, they'll come out and talk about what they're going to do as far as taper and such, which will likely continue. But new problems on the horizon for Janet Yellen, and I'll talk about that right after the next break. The reason it's going to be after this next break, it's Monday, and we go to American Family Association's government, the person, correspondent, in charge of governmental affairs or looking at governmental affairs for American Family Association, Sandy Rios. Of course, Sandy Rios in the morning. You hear her the hour before me. For those of you on Biz Television and other radio networks, you're getting to know Sandy as she is here on Monday morning, giving us some insights into what we can look for from a political standpoint, what's coming out of Washington this week. Sandy, welcome.
Good morning, Dan. Listen, I love it when you struggle for nouns. I don't feel so badly.
Good. Good. It's especially Monday morning. It's Monday morning.
No, it makes me feel better. That's the bad part about doing radio. You have to have all those things on the tip of your tongue. You don't always have them.
And you think you're going to. That's the worst
Yes,
part.
Of course you do. Well, I'm the director of government relations affairs. I should be doing this in France, don't you think? Considering the circumstances with their president, I could be the director of governmental affairs over there and have a lot to talk about.
Wouldn't you? Oh, yeah. Brother.
Yeah, brother. Yeah, well.
State of the Union, Sandy. I want you to listen to this clip. Of course, Ted Cruz thinks that what President Obama ought to do is apologize. He said this yesterday on Face the Nation.
If you're really sorry, you don't just say you're sorry, you actually do something to fix the problem. The pattern we've seen over and over again with this president is he says he's sorry, he expresses outrage, but then he doesn't fix the problem. He keeps doing it over and over again.
And he's been doing it every State of the Union speech. He talks about jobs. Apparently, he's replacing his inequality word with something different. We'll see what that, how many times he talks about that. But what do you expect, Sandy, and what is the buzz there in Washington in reference to the State of the Union speech?
Well, one obvious thing that's really pretty frightening, Dan, and that is Dan Pfeiffer went on, I think, 5 Sunday talk shows yesterday. He's an advisor to the president, and made it very clear that the president is going to talk about something he mentioned last week. He will declare that poor President Obama can't get anything done because of congressional gridlock. So his response to that is going to use, he's got a pen and he's got a phone. So he's going to issue as many executive orders as he has to and needs to and wants is probably the first word I should have used, to do things the way he wants to without congressional help. He said that in any number of different ways on the Sunday talk shows. He's going to do it without Congress. And Dan, that is so serious. It's so serious that some people are saying that Republicans, when he says that in the State of the Union speech, should really, if they were in their right minds, get up and walk out en masse. Because what we're talking about is more autocratic rule from the executive branch, and we cannot stand for that. Somebody should stand up and say that you can't do that. That is unconstitutional. And so that's what people are talking about right now.
Well, I did hear all those comments, and, of course, one of the last things he said was if Congress doesn't act, the president will. And you're right. I think people aren't going to stand for it, but unfortunately, the people that we need, I guess, to not stand for that are those so-called proclaiming conservatives on Capitol Hill. Because they're not standing up. I hate to be that general. There are a few that are standing up. But what is it going to take other than, we see this declining approval rate of the president. The president, the only thing he can be concerned about now is his legacy. I'm sure for the benefit of the party, he would like to see the party win back the House of Representatives in these midterm elections. But It seems like we have, and tell me where I'm wrong on this. It seems like we have. So we had 4 years of the president shoving down the throats of Americans Obamacare. Now we've got this second term of Republicans scared to death to take the focus off of Obamacare by fighting him on so many other very important issues, including some constitutional issues. Is that where we're looking forward to for the rest of this term?
Well, yes, and the other twist on this, Dan, is Republicans now, the Republican leadership, that's how we should distinguish this. It's the Republican leadership who doesn't have the courage to fight. It's not the rank and file. There's some courage in the rank and file.
Yes.
But the Republican leadership now is getting ready to go on their annual retreat. And we know, I'm sure it's true, I've read tons of sources on this. And we have proof and evidence that they are now, rather than embracing the debacle that is Obamacare in an election year, when the polls show, and all indicators are, they could retain power in the House and take back the Senate. Instead of embracing and doubling down on the disaster that is provably, inarguably, Obamacare, now they are signaling that they are going to try to pass immigration reform, which is completely and totally divisive, regardless of how you feel about it. And my listeners know how I feel about it. Regardless of how you feel about it, this is a divisive issue in the GOP. It will pit people against people, which will divide the whole caucus, the whole Tea Party against conservatives, against mainstream Republicans. This is going to cause a circular firing squad, which is a terrible time to embrace this issue right before the 2014 election. So instead of concentrating on what people can agree on is a disaster and is reason enough to get the left out of office, they are going to now embrace an issue that's going to divide their own side. And if you can figure out why that is, Dan, I'm all ears. Nobody here that I know of can quite figure out why in the world they're taking this suicide approach.
Well, I can't figure it out. I mean, the only thing that comes to mind, which I'm sure you've already talked about at some point in time, is that they actually believe that they are going to glean some votes or voters from this. And it's a very naive position. George Bush had the highest Hispanic votes of any Republican in many, many years, and even that wasn't even close to being the majority. But for some reason, I think we have a Republican leadership, or as I usually call it, the royalty of the Republican Party, believing that somehow they are going to win the votes of, Hispanic Americans.
Yes, they do, and but they forget that they're going to alienate their base. I realize the base is divided on this issue too, but there are enough people who are terribly concerned about jobs and the economy and taking on millions of illegal immigrants. And even if you don't now, the big carrot they're holding out now is, but we're not going to give citizenship. Well, that's really meaningless, Dan, because they will be here made legal and they will get legal status, which will then afford them tons of benefits legally. At a time when we are just going under, we cannot absorb this. It is not common sense on any level to do this.
No,
and
it
yet
isn't.
They seem to be hell-bent. They're having their retreat this week, and that's what they're talking. And this is the president's number one agenda. Now, the president has gone silent on this, Dan. He's decided to kind of hang back because the Republican leadership is doing his work now on this.
Yeah.
And I just find it shocking and just puzzling. It almost... Really, I have said this many, 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 many times before, but I'll say it again. It's almost as though the blindness is supernatural. It's like the division and blindness is like a supernatural thing, a veil that God has set about us to confuse us because He's bringing judgment. And
the economic consequence of all this, nobody cares a lick about. And as I was listening to the senior advisor, White House economic advisor, as you already mentioned, with Chris Wallace yesterday. Listen, here's the problem. This is why they think it's not hey, Devin, play that clip 32 for us.
It's important to remember this president inherited the worst economic situation since the Great Depression, a financial crisis.
But the recession ended 4 years ago.
Yes, and we have created, in the last 46 months, 8 million jobs. The unemployment rate has dropped to 6.7%. We're now producing more oil than before. The American auto industry is #1 in the world again. We are making progress, but there is more to do, and that's what you hear the president talk about.
See, the problem is that they actually believe that. See, they believe. Now, I don't care if you create 30 million jobs. And by the way, the vast majority of those 8 million jobs were part-time jobs. It's irrelevant if you're losing as many or more out the back door than you're bringing in the front door. It's irrelevant how many you create if you can't retain the job market as it is. And to say that the unemployment rate is going down without even discussing the fact that we have the lowest workforce in 37 years, without even talking about that, they actually believe that this president had something to do with oil production, which he despises fossil fuel. He's done everything possible to stop. 74% of all the wells that he shut down during the BP spill, the EPA still won't give permits to redrilling. And if it wasn't for George Bush issuing all those permits under his, hey, we're going to drill everywhere as fast as we can, and it took 3 to 4 years to get those permits going, if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't be producing. If it wasn't for the private sector. When we talk about the oil production, it is confirmation that a free market economy, when left alone, will take over. And that's exactly what the oil industry does. When the federal government has shut down federal lands for oil, including the Gulf of Mexico, then the private sector said, hey, you know what? I think there's some money to be made here. We need to step it up. And they did, and they filled the gap, and they filled the void, and kept doing it. But they believe that this president is actually doing something for this economy. So they totally take their eye off. Well, I don't want to say they take their eye off the target. They never had their eye on it, but they move onto these other issues because they think the economy is actually doing better because we've seen a market rise. It's pathetic.
You know, Dan, the only where I might slightly disagree with you on that is that I don't think they believe it. I think they know exactly what they're doing. This is where I sound radical, and I step up to the plate. Yes, grant me radical status, because I believe that this destruction of our economy is intentional. And if anyone doubts that, I would have them just simply Google this, the Cloward-Piven strategy of manufacturing crisis, which is a couple of Columbia professors who wrote this, who's been the template for the left for a long time, which means you go in and you destroy in order to take power. So I don't think this is. I used to wonder when I started radio a long time ago. It was things were already not making sense, but as I started to study the left more, I began to realize, Dan, it wasn't that they lacked intelligence. It was that it's intentional. It is intentional chaos for the purpose of destruction in order to take power. That's as simple as I know how to state it.
I've come around to those terms. I've come around to that, and I went from calling him a socialist to a radical Marxist. And, you know, I always talk about, I wrote a master's thesis on Mussolini. The economics of Mussolini is what I wrote my master's thesis on. And when I think back on that, I think about those economics of Mussolini, who Hitler loved and embraced in the beginning of his reign. When you look back on that, that's exactly what we're seeing happening today with the Obama administration. So I don't disagree, but I do believe that he has surrounded himself with enough people that are so incompetent in understanding the economy that they actually believe some of these fabricated
Yeah, some of those, I think
numbers.
some may too. Yes, I agree with you.
We'll come right back and finish up with Sandy Rios right after this break. Financial issues. We'll be right back after this.